Welcome to Dig In Deeper for 2026. We've had a little bit of a break, but it's been good to step away from the mic for a little bit, but it's also good to get back in the chair. Got General Manager Jen Smith with us here today. Jen, how are you going?
I'm going fantastic. Great start for 2026, Alistair.
In what regards?
We've had some little summer treats, a bit of summer rain on our crops in my own farming system and here at the Gippsland Research Farm, so it's really kicking along some of our lamb feeding programs here, so a bit of buoyancy around us.
Yeah, prices are good too still.
Prices are fantastic. Forward contracts are looking strong.
Now, before we actually dive into the topic today, we're actually going to go way back to Jen Smith. Well, Jen, I've forgotten your maiden name. I actually knew you before you were married.
Chambers, that's
right. And we're going to go right back to early days of Jen Chambers and your journey into agriculture and then right up to now and what you've learned along the way. Just off the top, you're actually a twin.
I sure am. Got a twin brother called Tim.
Yeah, identical?
No, he's a boy. I beat him out the canal though.
Yeah, you're older, eh?
Yes, 12 minutes. I remind him every time I see him.
Where does Jen and twin brother, where do you grow up? Who else is in the family?
Born in Hampton, in Melbourne, and my folks had 4 kids and decided to move down to Gippsland for the tree change to bring up their kids in the clean green country air. Grew up in Hayfield.
So how old were you when you moved to Hayfield?
Just 2 years old when we moved down to Hayfield.
So you don't remember Melbourne?
Not at all.
No, good thing.
Moved down to Hayfield at 2, and yes, all of my schooling, primary school years at Hayfield Primary School, and went to high school at Maffra Secondary College. The day I finished,
were you an academic? Were you back then?
I was okay at school. I wasn't overly applied. I was more interested in maybe some of the social life and the activities involved in school. But yeah, no, I did do pretty well at school. So the day I finished year 12, I bootlegged it back to Melbourne and went off to university and went and joined my sister down there in the Big Smoke. And
yeah, what did you go off to study, Jen?
I went off to study applied science and nursing, actually.
Oh, really?
And didn't last very long at that, and then had a many and varied journey through various other academic pursuits for a few years down there in Melbourne.
What did you come away with apart from a new social life?
I come away with a social work degree when I moved back here, and yeah.
Did you work in that area?
I've done one little stint over the years in that area.
Right. Yep. What's the big grin on your face for? You must have some stories to back that up.
Oh no, there's some good stories. Melbourne was good fun. Was good fun. And
you said you moved back to here. Do you mean back to Bensdale?
Yeah, back to the country, I guess.
Yeah.
So I met Brad when I was about 14 years old down on Raymond Island. I was down there on a kids' summer camp, and his folks thought that he needed to get off the farm and socialise with others. So, yeah, I met Brad and knew Brad right through my teen years. But, yeah, we sort of hooked up early in our 20s, and we spent a bit of time travelling and went overseas, and then I moved back here, in with your mum, actually.
Yeah, you did. I was out of home by this stage. I didn't actually get the privilege to board with you, but... you stayed with half my family, actually. I'm from a big family, so one extra person didn't make much of a difference, actually. So I just want to recall just a little bit. You said it's Brad Smith you're talking about, who's now your husband. I was editing a podcast about Brad, who will be released soon. What was a young 14-year-old Brad like? For all those people that listen and know Brad now, has he changed, or is he a different boy back then?
Oh, look, I think he had a few less grey hairs. He hadn't spent 20 years of his life with me as his wife. So, but no, look, Brad was a pretty carefree but quite applied lad. When he worked, and when he played. He very much enjoyed a lot of camping and mucking around in the river and different things with us as kids or as young adults when we were sort of growing up. But he was the adventurous one. He'd drive into youth camp at 16 years old without a licence, and it was always down from Tambo Crossing. There was always an adventure to be had when Brad Smith was around, and taking my uni friends up to the farm and shooting tin cans on the weekend and things like that. So.
Yep, you're locked and loaded. Now, you're not part of an ag background then, by the sounds of things?
No, not at all. I went to school at Maffra Secondary College, and most of my friends were dairy farmers' kids, and just watching just how some of those dynamics played out in different things. And I remember a friend of mine coming to Lake Centrance with our family for a bit of a holiday, and it was the furthest she'd ever been from home, and we were about 80 kilometres from her home. So I vowed never to involve myself in primary production. I didn't think much of that lifestyle looking from the outside in. But Love's got different ideas, and very much anchored into my relationship with Brad. And I knew right from the start, having been friends with him right through that teen years, that meant choosing agriculture as well. And when we transitioned from friends, actually one of the first dates that he took me on was a NSA Better Beef Group meeting up at the NSA pub. So, and I do recall having to lean over to him and asking him the difference between a heifer and a steer. So that was about 20 years ago, just a touch under 20 years ago now. So.
Yeah, and you definitely know the difference now because you're very much immersed in the business, Smith Graziers.
Yes, absolutely. So when I worked in irrigation design, and then I worked for the Catchment Management Authority, and very much became immersed in a lot of the different sort of groups and networks and bits and pieces around our region, and started to see agriculture from a very different perspective, and just over the years got more and more involved in Smith Graziers, which was the farming business that Brad and his parents ran, and realised that there was a set of creative and critical skills, analytical skills that I could bring to that business, and very much when the kids come on board, hopped on board full time with Brad, and got really stuck into farming, and I really enjoyed those young years up at Tambo Crossing with Brad and the kids, and went on a very steep learning curve around how we do farming well.
Yep. And do you still get out in a practical sense very much, Jen, or are you behind the scenes with the books and running the business side of it, mate?
Look, at least once a week I like to go out and annoy Brad, like go and hop in the yards. I was in the yards with him this morning, so I like to keep in touch with what's happening, and it's quite good. But no, very much very busy these days with Gippsland Agricultural Group.
Yeah, let's just talk a little bit about that journey. So you said you were in irrigation, which was McCracken's back then, I think.
McCracken's Water Services, yeah.
Yep. Now it's actually no longer exists, does it? Because it was Nutrient Water.
Nutrient Water, yeah.
But they've closed up shop in Bairnsdale and
now
taken
we've
over
got
by Jason.
Yeah, Bairnsdale Irrigation. Big shout out to those guys, doing a good job for people in the region.
Yep. So your journey from designing irrigation systems in that, you actually took a little bit more of a stint in the government organisation for a while, didn't you?
Yeah, I worked for the Catchment Management Authority on their river health team. So that was a fantastic experience and insight into, the different ways in which things work. Working in a statutory authority gives you an insight into government, coming out of private enterprise, working in other businesses. It was a really good couple of years. I really enjoyed working there and learnt a lot.
Yeah, so it's funny how things all work together, because that gave you a really good foundation of what you're doing now. You're working in government organisations, and what you just mentioned. You went up for a little hiatus and had some babies, and then how did you actually end up in Gippsland Ag? Did you just get tapped on the shoulder?
Yeah, so about 5 years ago, things were sort of really kicking off with Gippsland Ag. Gippsland Ag was successful in securing a couple of funding agreements through the Future Drought Fund, and we really needed somebody to just step in for a little while and do a bit of that sort of project management and coordination and organisation. And I got a tap on the shoulder from Trev Caithness, who has been a terrific mentor of mine and a fantastic advocate for agricultural learning and extension, and through a lot of the activities that I've done with Trevor and a lot of the other guys that started up Gippsland Agricultural Group, I've really learnt a lot on my farming journey in a short space of time. So I was very, very happy to hop on board in that first instance. It's all grown a lot more than what we thought in a short space of time.
How many hours are you promised in the first?
Yeah, so we thought it might be. So Trev asked me if I'd hop into the arena for a day a week for a year, just till we got things going. So that was 5 years ago, and it's definitely a few days a week now. So, but enjoyed every minute of it.
You could be doing more too, but there's requirements elsewhere. So where are we at now? Right now with Gippsland Ag, we've had a couple of changes just recently.
Yeah, so we've had some leadership changes within the group, bit of a structure shift there. We've got Lisa Angus on as our executive chair, Trev's back on the board, and a few of our early leaders have kind of stepped stepped out and let it. We've got some other young leaders sort of coming through to drive agricultural research and demonstration, extension and learning for Gippsland Ag. So it's a really good, a really good progression. I'd like to think that Gippsland Ag, after 5 years, we're sort of, we're graduating out of that sort of startup phase. We're coming out of kindergarten and really getting into the business of learning how to farm better in our region, learning how to unlock that productivity potential on our farms. We've got some fantastic projects coming up for 2026. We've got some great projects that we've been working on over the last couple of years that we'll sort of see come to fruition. We've got a perennial pasture project, which Brad and I and our Tambo Crossing farm has been a part of for 5 years. So Dave Caldwell and Alison Gunn will be presenting that one on the 12th of Feb here at the Ag Centre. So it's looking like a fantastic year. We'll be out and about doing a lot of regional soil sampling. There'll be more opportunities for farmers to do those deep cores and to really understand their water holding capacity and that drought preparedness piece. So if you haven't signed up for our newsletter, make sure you do. Make sure you listen to the podcast, because there'll be good opportunities to figure out how to farm better on your farm.
Yeah, now you didn't mention one of the big new things we're doing. We're starting to spread our wings a little bit further in location. Talks about the new farm that we're looking at.
The Gippsland Research Farm is a piece of land that's owned by the East Gippsland Shire, and we've been here for 5 years, and they lease that to us, and we have a fantastic partnership with them. Just last year, we've expanded that footprint and gone into partnership with them with another piece of land at the Bairnsdale landfill facility. It's the fringe area for the tip. Used to be called the Tip Farm. We've named it Skene Creek Farm. Skene Creek runs through it and down into the Gippsland Lakes. We've got about 250 acres there of country that we can take some of our little plots and demos and tests that we've been doing here at the smaller Gippsland Research Farm and take them out to scale them, to scale those projects. At sort of a bit more of a relevant sort of commercial scale. So we'll be kicking off work this year with the installation of one of the southeast node drought projects and grow more topsoil. So we'll be taking some of the plot work that we've done over the last 3 years here and putting that into bigger plots so we can watch that over the coming years.
Yeah, and there's hope to be lots of partnerships through that property as well, with Landcare and CMA and a bunch of other different providers around the district, and hopefully we can all gather together and realise the potential of this property through good management and good practices.
Yeah, it's going to be fantastic.
All right, now Jen, the reason that we've got you on, apart from wanting to learn a bit more about Jen Smith before she was a farmer, is that you and Brad probably one or two more than you, have been through a fair few significant bushfires through some of your properties in the Gippsland area, and as we speak, the risk has definitely reduced a little bit, but Dargo is still burning significantly up there. It's only going to take a couple of hot days, which are forecasted soon, to get that flared up. So we thought, with your experience, yours and Brad's experience, it would be worth talking to you guys about what you've done in preparation and then also coming out the other side. So do you want to tell us a little bit about the background of, well, I suppose Smith Graziers, because I think there's a couple of fires before you were on the scene, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah, so mention to the listeners what Brad and David and Heather have all gone through in the past, up until most recently in 2019, I guess.
Yeah, so bushfires is something that we'd all kind of rather not talk about, but it is something that we need to keep on the front of our minds. Smith Graziers is made up of Heather and David and Brad and Jen Smith, and a couple of Brad's siblings are very much connected to the family farm, although not actively involved. Brad and his folks moved to Tambo Crossing in the year 2000. David and Heather shifted across from the Western District. It was very evident to them that Brad was mad keen on farming, and they wanted to spread their wings a little bit. David and Brad actually bought the farm when they were up here on holidays without Heather actually seeing it or being overly consulted on it. So 2020 they moved over here, and since then we've had a number of different bushfires burning up in the Alps, in the Great Alpine National Park, which surrounds Tambo Crossing on all four sides. But twice in that time, the Tambo Crossing farm has been significantly fire impacted. So in 2006, 2007, the whole farm was taken out by the fires, and every fence, every gate, every bit of infrastructure that essentially kind of wasn't immediately around the house and sheds was absolutely decimated in those fires. We lost 350 sheep. I was fresh-ish on the scene. I actively remember those times, but wasn't involved in the decision-making and management of the farm at that time. The second experience we had was the Black Summer fires in 2019 and 2020, which by that stage we had a share farm, and we'd had another farm, a share farm down at Sarsfield near Bruthen, and we had another farm at Clifton Creek down in the foothills just 15 minutes north of Bensdale. And the 2019-20 fires took out all three of those farms in that event. And it was interesting to note the difference between how we coped with the 1920 fire, so much better than the 6-7 fire. In both instances, it was, it's pretty brutal when it happens, and you really need your family and your community around to do that recovery piece. But there were some big differences in that.
Yeah. So coming from the Western Districts, fire wasn't probably at the forefront of Heather and David's mind, or fire management.
Not at all.
And do you think that's why, with the lack of experience or knowledge or preparation, is that why the 06-07 fires were so much more devastating?
Yeah, I think it's part of it. I think it's part of it, being new to a farm in terms of how the infrastructure is set up, how the fences are organised, and the water and containment feeding and various other aspects of a farm. Anyone who's just picked up a new bit of dirt knows that it's a bit of a journey to get things organised, and definitely having been there a significant amount of time longer when Black Summer hit, we were more organised. And there were still things about Black Summer in 2020 that were really challenging and still lacking in our fire readiness and fire response.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the learnings you've had through both events, I guess, because you would have learnt things in 2019-20 as well. From the first fires to the second, what stands out as significantly different than preparation or decision making?
Yeah, so the 06-07 fires took out every fence that we had, and so immediately containing animals just to feed them was imperative and an incredibly challenging feat. And I was just talking to a guy over in the Western District who was burnt out just recently, and he's just trying to navigate that process for himself right now. And so, not being able to contain those animals to actually get the feed to them. 26-7, we re-fenced the entire farm with steel fences and steel gates. And so when we were burnt out in 2020 at the Tambo Crossing farm, fencing and stock containment was not an issue. Water infrastructure was a big challenge between, in that first fire, and again, not so much in that 2020 fire. Our reticulated water to our entire farm, holding tanks, having a system that's set up to fight a fire so that CFA, DECA, all of those guys can actually draw water from different points to help us and to help the neighbours and other people defend was really different by the time we sort of got around to 2020. And it continues to be something that we work on and try to refine. It gives us really good clean stock water during the good times. It gives us those reported 3 to 5% gains for the animal health and weights, but also gives us opportunities during the fires and droughts to be able to strategically access water when we need it.
Yeah, and what about machinery? Have you got any new bits of machinery that's helped in the second set of fires?
Yeah, so the first fire, getting every animal fed on your farm, like some of these, the farms at sort of a bit of scale with, in 2020, 450 sheep and a couple of thousand sheep, getting all of those animals fed, can present a real challenge. You've got a couple of thousand animals that are sitting out there one day eating grass, and then you've got to figure out how to feed every single one of them the next day. After the 2020 fires, we destocked quite quickly. I would encourage anybody right now who's thinking that, they could be at a fire risk, give your agent a call and figure out what that plan is. Our agent helped us get livestock off our property within days of those animals being fire impacted, and it's really important to have that active relationship with somebody that when the proverbial really hits the fan, can help you with trucks, can get animals in, can just get things sorted for you, that understands you and understands your system and where things are.
So you're talking about selling off or gisting, or a combination depending on what you're...
Yeah, so anything that you... a combination of things. We had a lot of offers in 2020 for people to feed pad animals. We were sort of at the end of that sort of 3 to 4 year drought, while people sort of couldn't necessarily offer up any feed support. They're having the infrastructure and feed padding animals, so being ready to do that. I think for those of us that are farming in some of these remote areas up in the Alps and different things, and even, the Clifton Creek farm burn, and it's 15 minutes north of Bensdale, thinking about where we would relocate our animals to, how we might actually sell them. What is that? What are those plans that you can put in place to make sure that as quick as they can, those animals actually get fed? And, after 06, 07, we cash is a bit short. You sort of, you're building up the farm business. But, for $2,000, you can buy yourself a jackie bin, get an old trailer from the farmyard, and you can be feeding animals pretty quickly. We were blessed in the Black Summer fires to get a bushfire recovery grant, and we actually used that funding to buy what's called a steel feeder. So it's a 3-ton trailer, basically, that we can feed, and we can feed every animal that we have on a property, within a couple of hours every day. We saw that grant as a bit of a not a free kick, but a real opportunity to do something to set ourselves up well, and so that really changed things in terms of our capacity to hold our animals and to not have to sell them off, or to not have to send them away for expensive adjustment. So I would say for anyone right now, whether you've got, if you've got 20 animals, if you've got 200, if you've got 500, do you have some sort of infrastructure that you can get a 1-ton bag of pellets fed out, in a quick and efficient manner? Is it something that somebody else could do in your system as well? Because when you're trying to recover from a bushfire and make decisions about fencing and trying to source feed and do other things, getting that couple of kilos of feed into each animal every day becomes incredibly imperative. And every single blade of grass went from all 3 of our farms in 2020. So that was something that was very important for us.
Just want to talk a little bit, you mentioned about the fire government grants there. How many people do you think applied for grants or help in your area in that time? And is it something that we as producers need to be actually a bit more active in? Because after fires or during droughts, there are often lots of these opportunities available, but it's not always taken up by people, is it?
No, it's not always taken up. It can be a daunting process to navigate. I am reasonably handy with a bit of paper and a computer, and I don't take that for granted. The Allen government has announced a package at the moment, so for anyone listening who has been fire affected, probably more so in the western part of the state, there is agricultural recovery grants available. So picking up the phone, taking that time to go through that process and put that application in. Yes, it's frustrating. Yes, it's a less than ideal process at times, but there are people to help you with that. So I would suggest that maybe sort of 70 to 80% of producers in our region took up those that were eligible, took up the Black Summer recovery grants. Massive shout out to elders and other organisations that actually helped farmers work their way through that paperwork. So, if you're struggling with that as a process post fire, reach out and ask for a bit of help.
Yeah, and I can say that once you've done one, a lot of the stuff is replicated, isn't it, in future years? So make sure you get that first one out of the road, so that when they do come up, if they come up, you've got all the sort of the skills to go ahead with it and get it done, because some of the money was quite significant, wasn't it?
Yes.
Around the time. So I want to talk about 3 stages of the fire, I guess, and then there's 3 sort of key things that we want to look at. So pre-fire, often fires, we know fires in the district, like we've got the Dargo one burning now. I see there's 3 things. You've got your farm, the actual infrastructure and property, you've got the animal, and then the last one that we haven't actually talked about much is the people. Do you want to go through like a pre-fire check on your farm, your animals, and then the people around you? What would you be giving advice around those 3 things?
Yeah, okay, so I'll start with the farm. getting rid of things that you don't have to worry about, setting things up in your farming system is really important to kind of reduce that load. What are the things that you don't have to worry about? When you're thinking about fencing program and refurbishments, get steel fences in. When you're, Brad has a bit of a saying around, with regard to the houses and the sheds and the yards, we haven't lost any significant infrastructure in those two bushfires, because around our houses and sheds and yards, it was clean, it was clear, and it was green. And, the Clifton Creek house was undefended during those fires, and it survived. Making sure the vegetation is away from your property, that you've got a bit of green grass around it, can make a real difference. So that's sort of number one. I think don't underestimate what it's going to cost you to lose your livestock handling facilities in a bushfire. Clean up around your cattle yards, get the whippersnipper out, get the roundup out, do what you need to do, get that dead grass away from your cattle that's built up around the edge of your cattle yards and your sheep yards, because to lose that infrastructure and then to try and sort out those animals afterwards can be pretty stressful. In terms of the farm, for us, we've got a bit of a strategy around summer crops. So brassicas, in the 1920 fires, we lost most of our sheep in the 06-07 fires, and we saved all of our sheep in the 1920 fires. Part of that was having containment feeding, having some auto feeders, having some of that infrastructure that we'd sort of put in for drought feeding. But a big part of that too was having some summer crops in that don't burn. So obviously that's not something that you can prepare right now in January, but thinking about that every year, if we're approaching these years with sort of bushfire risk, strategically where can those summer crops go to give you that little bit of protection. The water infrastructure, obviously, for the farm I mentioned before is really, really important. When you're putting in your livestock watering infrastructure, think about what it means for, that CFA slip-on or that tanker. What is it that they might need to actually draw from a fence line or a different post or something like that? Give your local CFA a call and have a chat to them about, if they were defending a roadside or a property or something like that, how might they access that water infrastructure that you've got on your farm already. In terms of the people, it's a tough one. This Dargo complex is just north of us here. We've got a property down on the plains now, and it's been interesting to sort of watch those events unfold. We had the really sort of hot, windy days in the region, and you can sort of feel the whole nervous system of the region sort of lift a little bit. We can all sort of remember that black summer as we see the images of the fires in Western Vic come out, and the stock losses and the farm losses and things like that. There's a lot going on in the minds and hearts of people around us. So taking that time to check in on people, I think we need to be ready and we need to be aware, but we also need to not oversaturate ourselves. If it's not those high fire danger days, if there's not a fire close to you, maybe don't have your Vic emergency app beeping at you all the time about different fire signals and things like that. We've seen, particularly in this sort of eastern part of Gippsland, people have not at all been prepared and a fire has hit within 24 hours. People have sat and waited every day for 14 weeks for a fire to come out of the hills and into Omeo. I think that we need to adapt the mindset around getting ourselves organised and then getting on with farming. Get your farm organised, get your infrastructure, your water carts and your feed out stuff set up and organised, and just get on with the tasks of farming so that on those days where that risk is high, you can engage, you can be talking about it, but for the rest of the time looking after yourself and getting on with the business of farming.
I think it's important to check in on people, and like you said, don't oversaturate them, but just how you go and got your pumps filled up and service ready to go, and then leave it at that. But I think that's one thing that we as a community do really well is look out for each other.
I think one of the things too we saw in the Black Summer fires with sort of, the use of mobile phones and things like WhatsApp and different things like that, being able to communicate with the people in your immediate area is really important.
You didn't lose phone reception up there?
We lost phone reception. When a fire front comes through, generally, some of the mobile phone towers or different things like that will be affected. Having capacity to communicate, being set up with a local WhatsApp group, and we've seen different people around sort of Clifton Creek and other areas set up, having two-way radios, being prepared to communicate during those times is really, really important.
Yeah, for sure. What about during the fire then? Let's talk about the farm, the animals and people during an actual fire when it's actually at your doorstep. Where's your mindset with those three different things?
Yeah, so I'll talk about the Black Summer fires. So the fire complex was actually a couple of valleys away from us, and we were aware that obviously the Alps were on fire. We were sort of a couple of days before it hit us there at Tambo Crossing. We were actually helping some friends up the line a bit. That fire actually generated a pyrocumulus, so a smoke tower of embers and ash, 36 kilometres tall, and then it actually collapsed. And so the fire ran something like, I can't remember the stats, it was something like 40 k's in a very, very short space of time, and ended up on Tambo Crossing's doorstep. We didn't have our animals in containment at that point. We'd organised the yards, we'd organised the water. We thought that something was, potentially going to happen that summer, but we weren't expecting it when it happened. And so, having those animals somewhere that, you know that you actually can muster them without having to go through, maybe bush paddocks or gullies and things like that is something that we think about now. We did have to muster those. We had to muster 450 cattle in the middle of the night while the range right around the fire, while the range around the farm was on fire. That was kind of a real pressure point, and for us, and something that, if we can avoid it, that's something we would do again in the future. So thinking through different scenarios, if the fringe country around your farm was on fire, or you had some sort of ember attack or whatever, where is it that you can muster your animals from into containment without having that kind of radiant heat impact from bush that's on fire, I guess is kind of something that we're sort of thinking a fair bit about now. And it does require quite a bit of thought. You've got to be thinking, back in the spring, where you're rotating your animals to and from. Are they coming closer or further away from the house as that bushfire risk occurs? We have natural rotations within all of our farming systems, and the ways in which it seems better to move animals, and the way in which animals like to move, and the way we can best utilise our grass. But maybe some of these times where we do have these fire complexes around us and things is a time to really challenge that paradigm. Yeah,
and like you said, that sometimes we're waiting weeks. It's just ticking away beside us and you don't actually know. So sometimes it's hard to keep the animals too close for too long. So being flexible with that plan too is important, I guess.
If you've got silos on your farm, making sure they're cleaned out, making sure they're ready to go, making sure your blower pipes are in service. If you're unfortunate and you do get burnt out, one phone call and you've got feed on your farm, it makes a big difference if you're not trying to source, repair materials or blower pipes and things like that for your silos. Making sure your water cuts and things.
Just on that, roads get closed down for weeks, sometimes more.
Yes.
Do you think about putting some grain or getting some fodder up there earlier?
Yeah, absolutely. I think having a fibre source and a protein source on hand, for an area like Tambo Crossing, as you said, the roads were shut down in and out for a very long period of time, and longer than you think, because even though the road might be clear or the fire threat might be gone just a few days after that front comes through, you've got layers of government, Vic Roads, incident control have got to approve those roads as safe. If those guys are still working on putting the wet stuff on the red stuff, if they're still working on saving other people's lives and active fire fronts, then opening roads for feed and stock trucks and things like that aren't at the top of the list. And it's incredibly frustrating to deal with if you're trying to feed animals, if you're trying to move animals. Again, make sure that you've got a really good line of communication with a livestock carrier, with your livestock agent, and make sure you've got some feed on hand to at least feed everything on your farm for sort of, 3 to 10 days, I would suggest at a minimum if you're in a remote area.
Yeah, well, just a little story on that. I actually went out to your Clifton Creek property after those fires went through. Brad asked me if we could go check some fences and whatever else. And that is one thing too. I think it's really important to go and check as soon as you can, because there was actually polypipe that was burning up towards the house when we got there. So we managed to cut that and stop that. I don't know whether anything would have happened about it, but those little lingering fires can linger for a while. But we went out to another property further out at Clifton Creek, went in and checked the property, and it was just burnt to the ground, and got back to town and told them. They actually went out there about 4 days later, and they said, "Oh, how'd you actually get in?" And I said, "I just up the driveway, and there was a tree that was burning. We didn't know from the centre, and I don't know when it fell over the driveway, but when they went to go out the 3 days later, a massive big gum tree had fallen over the road. So there's obvious risks by travelling around after the fire. Risk has gone through, and I think in those 19 fires, a fire truck might have had a tree fall on it for that very same reason. So there is plenty of risk after the fire have gone through, and that's why they do close down roads. But it's been understanding that there will be closed roads for a long time, or longer than you expect. So being organised. Are you a stay and fight, or do you do what you can and go?
Yeah, so our properties are quite defendable with regard to our water infrastructure, with our vehicles, our water carts. As I said, having things clear, clean, and green around our homes, having a large water reserve makes our properties defendable. So yes, our plan is to stay and defend with and there's a particular focus obviously there on livestock and making sure that they're safe and making sure they're watered and protected. And we lost 350 sheep in the 06-07 fires. They weren't killed by the radiant heat. It was those slow crawling fires along the ground that actually impacted their feet, their hooves separate, burns their lungs and their noses and their lips and their teats. And to have to euthanize and bury livestock on your own farm is not something that we would ever like to go through again. And so having the capacity to contain things, to feed things and to fend them during the fires is something that's very important to us and a plan that we have. That said, also within our planning, if we can reduce the spread of our livestock across our farms, if we can contain them to one property. We all saw the Chinook helicopters carting hay into remote areas after the Black Summer fires, and hats off to the Defence Force and the government for supporting us in those endeavours. But we all know how much feed 300 hungry cows need through a campaign like that. So yes, our approach is to stay and defend, but to consolidate and to reduce where we're doing that and to really focus in on livestock protection. Yeah,
I think one thing we should mention though is that Brad is very experienced, and a couple of guys around there are very experienced with fighting fires and have a lot of the right gear as well. So anyone that's thinking that that's the right thing to do, if you've got the knowledge and experience, then that's one thing. But if you haven't been through something like that before, you need to start getting around people that have, because anyone that's been through a fire will tell you it's the first time is always a very different experience than what they expect. So make sure you're well set up and prepared, and stay on if you're competent and feel like you can keep people safe that up there. What about post fires?
Yeah, so post fires, there's an acute stress and a whole lot of adrenaline that comes when the fire comes through and getting everything done and sorted and protected. Post fires is a long, drawn out marathon when your farm is fire affected.
Yep, so just talk immediately after, once the fire front's gone through. So we actually took some cattle on adjustment, and the truck driver had not showered in 3 days, he said. He'd been up since 4 this morning. We were unloading at midnight that night. So firstly, in the hours after, there's going to be lack of sleep and decision-making, all sorts of things going on.
Yeah, so immediately after that fire front goes through and everything sort of, you've done your best to reduce that impact and to protect all of the livestock. The first phone calls we're making is to the livestock agent. What's the situation? Outsourcing them, understanding what the situations are with the road open and closing, fodder in, fodder out, animals in, animals out, starting to make a plan around what can and can't happen and where things can be be placed. Immediately after the Black Summer Fire came through in 4 fronts, and we were actually able to move cattle in between the fronts with the help of our livestock agent at that time. So immediately after, that's kind of that first phone call out is around that. And then just in the days after, trying to, when you move it, you're sleep deprived. You sort of, you've been fighting fires. You've sort of been on high alert, trying to settle the nervous system down, trying to get some sleep so that you can make some good decisions around actually what you're going to do with regard to selling off livestock or adjusting livestock, where you're going to put fences back and things like that. In the 06-07 fires, our decision making was really pressured in those first couple of weeks, and fences went up ideally where they may not have gone up if we sort of had a thought about it a bit longer. Certain approaches to things were just not sort of how you do it. After a few weeks in 06-07, we actually had somebody join the Smith Graziers team. His name was Colin, and he actually ended up being a bit of a project manager for us. He was an administrator, not a farmer at all, but understood, what needed to happen and how things needed to go. And he actually got to the point of getting everything out of Brad and David's head and getting it on paper. And what that meant is that we were really able to utilise offers of help and assistance, which come a lot from your friends and your family and your community post-bushfire. But coordinating all of those people to do different jobs is really challenging. If you've got a plan and you're organised, you can start to work through those things a lot more efficiently. So same thing again in Black Summer is getting a plan around what you're doing. If you can, if your animals are fed and watered and safe, just grab your family and just get away for a minute or two, even if it's a couple of hours by the river, and just do something different. Just try and sort of reset your mind so that you can come back at it fresh with that decision making. It's challenging. I remember pulling Brad away from the farm post Black Summer just to have a couple of hours at the beach with the kids in the afternoon, but it's really important to try and look after each other and just to protect that mental space a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's a really important thing that we often overlook, is that mental toll it takes on people. And I know people that have been through bushfires that won't even sit around a campfire for the next 3 or 4 years because that triggers some pretty heavy emotions in people. Just want to talk about Clifton Creek. The community at Clifton Creek post bushfires seems to be a really strong one now. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a lot thanks to you as well, and the things that you got up and going, and you don't have to take credit on air for it, but it was largely to do with you and the crew around there. What did you guys do out there as a community to make sure that you're looking out for each other in that community, and it's still going strong to this day?
Yeah, so it's called community-led recovery. It's a function that our state government will deploy post these types of bushfire events, and the Allen government made an announcement the other day about some community-led recovery being set up over in the west of Victoria. So post bushfires, and it wasn't me at all. There was 15. There was a team of 15 sort of community leaders in Clifton Creek, and then every single community member in Clifton Creek got involved in, as a community, how did we sort of want to recover from it? We lost a lot of homes. There was a lot of damage and decimation to the bush and to the environment and ecology, which was really important to people. There was a lot of damage to pastures and farms, which was important to other people. There was a lot of really significantly psychologically and emotionally impacted people post that Black Summer event in our community, and people, that was important to people. So different things, for different reasons, important to people, and the community came together around sort of how do we recover from this collectively. And as I said, it was a team of 15 who organised themselves into a community-led bushfire recovery team and worked through a series of community priorities and different projects, anything from, the playground for the kids that was taken out, 15 years ago because it was derelict, getting put back up so that kids had a place to come together and make sense of an event like that. Improving facilities, community facilities at the hall around sort of having, power and water and all these sorts of practical utilities available for community spaces during the emergency and after the emergency. Improving different community facilities, but but probably mostly was, quite a lot of community engagement events, opportunities for people to come together and to be together. As a community, you sort of you tackle a fire like that together, and what you kind of do afterwards and how you come together afterwards becomes pretty important. And a shout out to our little community up there at Tambo Crossing. There's 28 residents in that Tambo Crossing Valley area, and the same deal goes. To come together. To tackle events like that is really important, and then how do you come together afterwards as well?
Well, let's just talk. We'll change gears a little, finish on a good note. Silver linings out of bushfires. What have you noticed of silver linings out of bushfires for personal farms or communities?
Yeah, people? So Tambo Crossing, we 52 gates on the Tambo Crossing farm, and previous to the bushfires taking out all of our crappy wooden fences, we had about 2 that swung. Yeah. And now we've got about 50 that swing. Yeah. There's good things that come around kind of setting up your farm and your infrastructure and different things and how things are organised and stuff. There can be an opportunity around, pasture recovery and how we plant back those better deep-rooted perennial pastures that help us with drought or might be sort of more bushfire tolerant in the future. So, some good practical and sort of production-focused, I think, opportunities there around farming. With regard to community, I guess we live in a we live in a very, very connected world now. You don't have to have your neighbours to have mates. You can connect, very, very broadly kind of around your interest areas. But when these events happen, and they happen to everybody within an area, there's a shared experience. It's not a positive experience, but it is a shared experience, and it does bring people together, and diverse people from kind of different backgrounds. A community there at Clifton Creek is full of blue collar workers and white collar workers and farmers and environmentalists and lots of different people, and so getting that melting pot together and challenging some of your own beliefs and ideals about the world can be really good for us.
Oh, Jen, there's a lot there that you've unpacked, and probably a lot more that we could go into, but we just want to put this out there so that people can start to put in a bit of a plan that are on the edges of that Dargo fire, that with a few days of ordinary weather could be facing something like this. We hope and pray that that's not the case, but knowledge is power, and we want to be able to share that with you. If you do have questions, you can reach out to the Gippsland Ag team, and I know Jen would be more than happy to steer you in the right direction or point you to people that might have some more information for you. The other thing too is that Morgan Davis from Elders in Bairnsdale is still looking for a bit of adjustment for properties that were burnt out over in the west. So if you're listening and think you might be able to put a truckload or 2 of cattle on fairly short term at this stage, but they're still looking for some paddocks with feed, and doesn't matter what quality feed, because compared to burnt grass, it's going to be better than what they've got. So if you do have something, reach out to Morgan Davies as well. Get in touch with him. He'll appreciate that too. So anything else before we sign off, Jen?
No, I just encourage people to, from an agricultural perspective, if you type in Agriculture Victoria bushfire, it'll take you to some information pages. Get familiar with it now, even if you're not bushfire impacted. A lot of different services and different things. There's another thing that you can do. You can register with an organisation called Rural Aid. I registered, Brad and I, just a month ago. They've got an online portal. It took me about 40 seconds, and I'm registered now with a username and password. So if I can put an opportunity, if the fires come through, I can, register. If there is something that I need, if I do need fodder, or I can help other people, or we can help other farmers and things like that, it becomes a really efficient way. Rural Aid are a national organisation that understand rural communities and understand farming, so great organisation to get behind. And locally here for us in East Gippsland, where this podcast is coming from, if you check out the East Gippsland Shire Emergency Services dashboard, there's lots and lots of different resources and things like that. The best thing you can do, though, in your rural area, here's my 3 takeaways. Number 1, give your CFA captain a phone call. Make sure you know his name. Get them out to have a look at your property, see what you can do, make sure they understand where your access tracks and different things are. They can give you some suggestions and ideas. Make sure you have some sort of feed infrastructure. Get yourself a jackie bin and a trailer. It can be as simple as that. And make sure you've got a water cart that works.
Very good. And on that note, we'll say goodbye and thanks for listening. A big thank you for tuning in today. And remember, if you have a question about today's episode or a topic you'd like us to cover, reach out to one of our many platforms and join the conversation. We're here because of your passion and commitment to agriculture. Together, we can build a stronger farming future.
This podcast is made possible by the Future Drought Fund Regional Drought Resilience Planning Program, co-funded by the Victorian and Australian governments.